Welcome to the Thursday session of the 2020 World Rowing Virtual Coaches Conference. My name is Axel Müller, member of the FIDA Youth Commission, and I'm glad to introduce you to the next three presentations. Lars-Arne Andersen, a physiotherapist who works since 2009 at Olympiatoppen, the Norwegian Olympic Training Center, prepared the presentation together with Morten Braten, the head of department, about training motor skills, which will include some practical demonstrations. Both are members of the Technical and Motor Development Skills Department at Olympiatoppen, which goal is to develop and implement best practices in technical and motor training. This type of training must develop the prerequisites for good technique, at the same time as it must prevent and develop trainability. Johan Flodin told me that Lars-Arne and Morten played an important role for the results of Norwegian rowing during the last decade. Both their skills and the way they collaborate with coaches, performance teams, and athletes in rowing and several other sports are unique. The second presenter is someone not easy to miss if you have been in Trakai for any of the past events. Edmundas Daukantas has been involved in all the past organizing committees when he is not leading the Lithuanian logistic companies beside his own one. Himself rowed in the 70s and 80s and occupied the vice presidency of Lithuanian Rowing Federation several times since 2004, or leading the events commission or acting as team manager for the team internationally. Definitely, he was part of that bunch of people who brought the Lithuanian team to achieve 2 medals in Rio 2016. He will talk about the long-term strategic plan that brought Lithuania to be among the best rowing nations. Last but not least, Dominique Basset, professor of sports, who worked for the French and Belgian Rowing Federation, as well 10 years for the French Swimming Federation towards London 2012, is a passionate about management and team leadership. With his year-long experience as rower and high-performance coach at several Olympic Games, he has also developed a big interest in the management of the human resources, which are crucial to keep athletes in sport. His lecture is intended to stimulate reflection and how we can retain our youth during difficult times. These times where lockdowns and digital life are our new normality. I wish you enjoy these lectures and take some notes for further questions.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lars-Arne Andersen. First, I would like to thank FISA for the invitation to this World Rowing Coaches Conference. I'm honored. Thank you very much. I work as a motor skills coach at the Technical and Motor Skills Development Department at Olympiatoppen, which is a part of Norwegian Olympic and Paralympic Committee and Confederation of Sports located in Oslo, Norway. I have a background from gymnastics, both as an athlete and as a coach for several years. Before I started working at Olympiatoppen, I worked 10 years as a physiotherapist. One of the sports I have had the privilege of working with for more than a decade is elite rowing in Norway. The topic today, I'll just share the screen with you guys, is here we are. Training motor skills for rowers. I will share with you the experiences I've had over the last 10 years. And maybe, and hopefully, I will give you some ideas how to work with motor skills development yourself. As a motor skills coach, my goal is to help elite athletes in Olympic sports to transfer physical skills into development of technical skills in order to increase efficiency and, of course, performance. I will show you short 2 videos. One of a rower in his right element, that's Kjetil Borch rowing a few weeks ago. And the other one is a rower on land, which is who is Olaf Tufte, working with motor skills on a training camp in Avish a few years ago.
accelerationen som du har nu.
Där och belastning på. I will divide this presentation in two parts. The first part is a short presentation of Olympiatoppen and our department. And the second part, I will try to show you some practical examples of how we can work with motor skills development among elite rowers in Norway. Olympiatoppen, the place I work in Oslo, is not very large facility. It's quite small. This is the Olympic Hall, we call it. It's smaller than a handball field, but it gives us a lot of opportunities when it comes to motor skills development. I will show you a short video, presenting how we work at Olympiatoppen, not only in my department, but Olympiatoppen as a whole. Here it is.
How do you become the best? So good, the whole world wants to watch you. So good, the whole world holds their breath. Will you succeed? Will you fail? Can you handle the pressure? Behind every big moment are 1,000 tiny moments, invisible from the outside. Ordinary days filled with extraordinary ambition, commitment, and hard work. To be one step ahead is all about being curious, meticulous, humble, dedicated, prepared for the unexpected, prepared for failure, prepared for success. To make the best even better. To make the good great. To develop the athletes of tomorrow. Together with the national teams, this, for us, is what it's all about.
Yeah, that was for me a very motivational video about Olympiatoppen. Our department, actually, we are only 4 people working there. That's Lena, top left. That's me, top right. My colleague Claude, bottom left, and my colleague Morten, facing down, bottom right. We have a lot of sports, different sports that we work with together. A number of sports. I, for instance, have also speed skating. I have track and field. I have swimming, triathlon as additional sports. But of course, rowing is the most fun. Our unit or our department is one of many departments. Olympiatoppen has its own training department, which we are a part of. And that training department also consists the sports psychology department, the strength department, the endurance department, the technology department, the elite sports coaching department, the Olympic training center, and the nutrition department. So there's a lot of people trying to optimize the elite athletes training. The athletes are already on a high performance level when they start working with Olympiatoppen. Olympiatoppen has entered into cooperation agreements with Norwegian sports federations so that the very best athletes have the opportunity, through follow-up from Olympiatoppen, to optimize their performance of development. A key word here is collaboration. Olympiatoppen does not take over responsibility for the athletes, but we assist the national teams in the performance development work. A typical performance team consists of the athletes, the national team coaches, the national team support staff, that normally is a doctor and a physiotherapist, a performance team coordinator called coach from Olympiatoppen, as well as professionals from Olympiatoppen's training department. The performance teamwork in rowing has worked and works very well. We have had continuity in the collaboration, and the communication among the team members flows very well. I think good communication is a main key for success. In our department, we are trying to create our own philosophy. We want to make it obvious for people what we work with, which framework we operate within. It is difficult to avoid being biased. So it is important for us to recognize that the experts in rowing are the rowing coaches and not least the rowers themselves. They know the whole, that is the athlete, of course, the environment in which the sport is done in, and the task, and they know it better than anyone else. In order to be able to contribute accurately, we try to obtain detailed knowledge about the athlete, about the environment, and not least about the task, that is the sport-specific technique. If we are biased, we do not have an open approach. So trying not to be biased, trying to have an open approach is very important for us. When we start working with athletes and sports, we try to gather as much information as we can about those three factors. We can do it with several tools, but the tools are worth nothing unless we have good relations and good communication, as I told you. We can do it in many ways. Of course, we can talk to the athlete and the coaches. We can talk to the physio and so on. We like to observe training session and competitions. We can do it via video or by visiting the athletes in training camps and so on. We can do screens. That the picture upright is Are Strandli doing a screen, a movement screen. We can do movement analysis. We have room for reflections and evaluation together with the athletes and the coaches. And in that way, we can get to know each other very well, which is very important. The picture down left is me. I took that picture. It's Johan Fodin and I were waiting for help because the engine broke down. I think we had 30-40 minutes with the quality talking while waiting for help. Finally, someone found us, brought us to the shore. Video down right is Are Strandli and Kristoffer Brun. And what I find interesting is that when I'm with the coach in the boat following the rowers, I can listen to what they talk about, his instructions, his feedback, his language. And that is very useful for me when I have my sessions with the athletes ashore, maybe later that day or later that season. So visiting the athletes and the sports in their arenas is very useful. For us, in our department, it is essential that the rower has the ownership of the skill and technique development. Because if they do not have the understanding that we have, then there maybe is no point. So it is important to know that the athlete understands what I understand. So no matter what step in the progression we are working with, it's important that the athletes see the red line from the exercise up to the complete specific technique. This is context written in Norwegian, by the way. So no matter where you are in the progression, the athlete should know that I'm doing this now because I know it's going to help me fulfilling my technique. And that's my job, trying to create that context for the athlete from early progression stages. To ensure that the rowers develop ownership of skills and technical development, we try to facilitate learning through user participation. An example is that at the beginning of a session or a longer period of training, we always provide a clarification. What expectations do you have? What expectations do I have? It is just as important during the session or during the training period to reflect on what is happening. What did you do now? How did you do it? And so on. That means we have to make room for those reflections. We can't just work out hard and that's it. We have to stop, reflect, and then move on. The last step in the process is an evaluation of the session or training period. What can I take with me further from motor training to rowing training or other training? With this setup, there will also be room for feedback. We can get a clearer picture of what kind of feedback the athlete prefers and how much. We can also try to find the right balance between internal and external feedback for the athlete. A good process of skills development can lead to the rower becoming better at translating motor skills into specific techniques, making the measures more relevant. He or she can also become better at adapting technique to continuously changing conditions. There are never two strokes that are identical. You will always have to adapt to changing conditions in any way. In my experience, the best rowers are very good at placing the measures they do in a context in a whole. And now for part 2. I will now try to give you some examples in some videos, how we work with athletes. When it comes to screening, we try to find out which movement strategies an athlete prefers. Among others, we use a tool called Map 1080 to see how the rowers solve different movement tasks, including flexion patterns, extension patterns, rotational patterns, and combinations of these patterns. Which solutions do they prefer? Are the solutions symmetrical? That means it's the left side's strategy equal to right side's. Are the strategies related to technical issues or injuries? These tests demand skills like timing, stability, mobility, and so on. It is important that the results are put into a context. Does the result mean anything for the rowing technique? This is a video of Lars-Arne a few years back, where he did this 1080 map test. You can see there's a web on the floor, and we can make him do reaches in different directions, and we can measure how far he can reach. But we also try to find out and learn how he's doing the reach. There are several strategies to do the flexion and the reach, and we give him many different variations in these reaches to see if his strategy is consistent, and of course if there are side differences. We try to observe how fluid the movements are. We can learn something about his balance strategy. We can see something about where the movement starts, what part of the body is initiating the movement. Does it start from the knee, from the hip, from the shoulder, and so on? And then we, after this test session, we try to analyze, to see if there's any link between what we see here and his rowing. Of course, it's hard to not be biased because different sports have different profiles when it comes to these tests. We can see from Are's profile that he is a rower, and his profile is very different from an alpine skiers, for instance. What I find interesting is that when I have done these tests with the rowers, they find it quite easy to relate it to what they struggle with when it comes to rowing technique. And that's interesting. The next video shows a few exercises that we use very often as a warm-up. Of course, warming up is important, but maybe more important is working with the quality in movements. We use active range of motion exercises. That means that you have parts of the body contracting, making the movement, while other parts are being stretched at the same time. A good quality here is that you have an efficient way of doing the movement, that there is not too much restriction in the movement. Quite often do we see that there's a kind of a tug war between different areas in the body, front and back, for instance, which makes the range of motion smaller. We often involve central parts of the body, including the pelvic area, the lower back, the hips, and the shoulder girdle in these exercises. These are the female rowers that I work with in Norway right now, doing some warm-up. You can see they are activating the back side of the body, the front side of the body, and stretching the opposite one. Of course, they have done these exercises quite a lot, but for me, it's important that they never do them with poor quality. They're always trying to produce good quality in the mobility work. This is Kjetil and Olaf in Livigno 2016. It's right ahead of Rio Olympics. And they have this routine ahead of other training, where they work with mobility and the quality of movements. Lars-Arne, this is a more passive stretching work. He wanted to improve his mobility in his hamstrings. And this is a good way of stretching hamstrings. We found out, for him at least, and he found it very relevant for his rowing technique. The next video, we are working with something we call problem-solving training. We want the athletes to be more aware of which strategies they use when they do movements. There are many ways of doing movements. Here we put them in a situation where they need to struggle to come up with an efficient solution. You can see the base of support is quite small. I have given them a weight that makes the situation asymmetric. And it's a new exercise for them, which also is quite hard, a new technique to cope. The exercises do not have to be similar to rowing, but of course it's okay if they are. We can do a lot of manipulation and modifications. We can make the weight heavier, we can make the surface more unstable, we can make it faster, we can define a rhythm we want them to do the exercise in, and so on. The principle of adapting is a very important skill in these exercises. We also work closer together with the Olympiatoppen's strength department problem-solving training. So making things heavy and difficult at the same time is also something we do. This is Erik Solbakken and Oskar Helvig trying to find a good solution on this exercise. Good. You can see they need to have a good control over the pelvic area and the hips to be able to flex and extend the hips in this situation. This is a core exercise, but the main focus is on the sit bones, actually. We want them to use the hips to move the body, not the lower back. It should be stable all the time. This is Lars-Arne again. He's working with flexibility and core at the same time. We want an isolated hip movement without any movement in his lower back. This is a way of activating hip pelvic control. This is also a core exercise. We have made it a little bit more difficult than just ordinary abdominal work, also some hip work. This is an exercise that demands hip stability, pelvic control in a flexion extension pattern. And as you can see, there are many different exercises we can do here, maybe too many, but I like to vary between exercises. Different approaches, but the theme is the same. I want them to solve these movement problems in a good way, in an efficient way. So this is learning how to solve problems, and it can be useful, I think, in when you want to improve technique or change technique in the boat. Finally, I want to show you some work with more specific skills. This is not rowing, because if we want to improve the rowing as a whole, they can do it in a boat. We can take parts of the rowing technique and we can do some work ashore. It can be a position or a small part of a movement, a small range of a movement. Here, Olaf Tufte is working with precise extension in the knees and the ankles. We want a stable pelvic area, and we are giving him a small base of support. We want his weight on the front of his feet, and you can see these elastic bands that gives him more and more resistance while he extends. So when it comes to balance, this is also very challenging. So if Olaf manages this in an okay way, we can add more speed or even harder resistance. We want him to feel that it is going in, it's a good rhythm, it's fluid. Ari here is working with the upper body movement. We want his pelvic area to be a part of the upper body. The sit bone is in the center of his focus. The same focus here, but here he's moving his legs and keeping the upper body still. So sit bones is in focus in these exercises. You can see the equipment we use is actually Pilates equipment, but we use a lot of different equipment, what we have available. So this is not a must, neither are this, but this is quite interesting. Here we're working with a quantum machine, Quantum 1080. It gives resistance in many different ways, but here Erik Solbakken is rowing, or doing parts of the rowing technique with constant speed. No matter how hard he tries to pull, the speed is the same. That gives him resistance all the way in the range of the movement. And when he's doing this on an ergometer, it's quite easy for him to relate to his rowing technique. This is work we do closely together with the strength department because this is more strength training, but you need to have the control while you do it. To sum up, I believe that knowledge about the rower, not only his technique, but the person, the environment, of course, I talked about the lake or the water, but also the group that you're working with, and the technique that the athlete have and the technique he wants or she wants to develop. The more I know, the better work I can do. Still, the ownership needs to be with the rowers. If I have the ownership and the rower don't, I think it will be very hard to believe that they will do the work. So it's my job to make them take the ownership. The way I present the exercises and my ideas must be in a way that they believe in it. The exercises, they are not worth very much unless they are transferable into the rowing technique or into the context. It's very connected to the last sentence. It's my job to explain how they can be relevant for the rowing technique. And finally, learning to learn movement strategies. I think that's essential. And I believe the way of doing that is to have a variation in measures and exercises. If you're good in learning strategies, I believe that you're good in changing strategies as well. It's easier for you to change from one technique to another if you have this, if you are good in this process, learning to learn movement strategies. That was all I got today. I hope this was interesting and maybe useful for you as well. I would like to again say thank you for the invitation and thank you.
Hello everyone. Hello dear rowing friends. Best regards from Lithuania, and today I would like to share with you experiences of our country federation in one of activities we have experienced. We can talk about long-term planning, or maybe even a more correct way to talk about building strategy of the rowing in the country. In experiences of coaches, in training processes, we are used to have very different training plans. Very common weekly training plans, monthly or 12-week cycles, competition season programs. A lot of federations are developing 4-year cycle for preparation for Olympic Games programs. What I would like to you present is not everywhere used approach. I believe in a lot of countries, but I'm not sure about everyone. But what we have experienced and what we did quite successfully in Lithuania, and this was 12 years rowing development strategy, which we started in some number of years ago. Why 12 years? Our country, Lithuanian rowers, were participating in Olympic Games since 1960 and almost in each and every Olympic Games. In 2000, bronze medal in Sydney for women's double was unbelievable great achievement for our country as independent country with new experiences in international sports. On the same time, we realized already that our national team was still consisting of athletes who began their careers during Soviet Union period. Our juniors were not really promising good results in nearest future. And we came to Athens, where we had one boat on 14th place, difficult economical situation in country, low state funding for rowing, and very limited sponsorship possibilities. That's why we came to conclusion that we need to think about possible way of changing. And decision was to build strategy which will allow us to return country in a level where we would like to be. And we agreed about common principles of building strategy. First of all, wide involvement of external competences, to involve people with knowledge not about only coaching, not only about selection processes and Olympic programs, but about processes in general, about planning and building strategies in general. And with those people together to use management process approach, which is more common in business or in state authorities than in sports. But with those principles, agree that we will not have any wishful thinking. We will not talk about dreams, but only goals which are needed to be achieved in order to have our sport sustainable and developing in the country in the right way. Team which was working on this project was initiated by Vice President of Lithuanian Rowing Federation of at that period, Mr. Aivaras Karalius, who were team members. They were not high-paid consultants. They were volunteers collected by team leader. There were people with rowing experience in the past, former rowers, and with experience of achievements outside rowing. Successful people in business, in professional careers, with achievements in state authorities. And of course, at the same time, we could not do it without coaches and sports management specialists who were involved directly in the rowing activities at that time. What was aim of the team? Aim was to build a strategy, an action plan, which can be presented to the annual Federation Congress. And with this plan, by using business management methodology, provide working material for new elected executive committee members, which will allow them to build short-term and long-term action plans and lead national federation in a long time in quite interesting and changing environment. With this plan, it would give possibility to develop sport of rowing in Lithuania successfully, and at the same time, for those leaders of national federations who were not willing to continue actively in the management on the sport, allow them just to step back, support rowing federation, and at the same time enjoy other activities in rowing, what some part of executive committee members of that period did. Methodology of building long-term strategy, a little bit difference comparing with what it is done in training plans for shorter periods or even in annual or 4 years Olympic programs. Because when building long-term planning, a lot of efforts are needed to evaluate not only development of the sport itself, but external factors which are affecting rowing, affecting sports, and should be taken into consideration in order to develop sports in the right way, and do not use efforts in the fields where no results is achievable. So first stage, evaluation on all layers of rowing in a country. Evaluation of present situation in general. How competitive rowing looks. How many members of national team we have? Do we have candidates? What is level of junior rowing and which direction is developing? Number of clubs, how many masters we have, number of coaches in the country and their education and competence, governance of rowing. Do we have correct federation structure? Do we have right tools to influence processes which are needed to be improved? And of course, infrastructure, number of boat houses, training facilities, even number of boats. Everything is important when you are starting long journey. After this study is done, it's not so difficult to come to quite traditional everywhere SWOT analysis, which allows to evaluate strengths and weaknesses of each of layers of the rowing in a country. What is good and bad with the juniors? What is good and bad with the coaches, etc., etc. And at the same time, it's very important, do not forget external factors. That's why PST analysis, which is evaluating legislation of sports, influence of government, possibilities of funding, are extremely important. We can talk a lot about passion, enthusiasm, but we can never forget, boat houses are not for free. Rowing boats are nice, but expensive. And we need professionals who are supporting athletes, and those professionals should earn some money for living. And that's why economics, finances, funding possibilities are vital for our sports as for any other sport. That's why we need to understand and evaluate them. We need to understand attitude of community, how they perceive rowing, how families of the rowers are happy with activity of their family members. Do we have possibilities to attract spectators to races and regattas? And evaluation of technologies with all means of that. Possibilities to support coaches with new information technologies, and at the same time, evaluation of influence of internet and social network, which we can call negative because young people are more busy in front of computers than at boat houses and training facilities. And after analysis of all complex of data federation has, it is possible to turn to planning process. And first stage is setting of the goals, not setting of calendar and targets, but only goals which we would like to receive or which we understand that are needed to be received. And really set priorities to areas which are well recognized by community, by state, by government, or potential sponsors. And principles of planning are what to do with the strengths after SWOT analysis. Just to think how we can protect them, that they will remain as their strengths in the future. How to keep us strong in the areas where we are strong today. And if there is still possibility to develop and grow, of course, develop and grow and go forward. More challenging and more interesting process is to work with weaknesses. Weaknesses should be evaluated and everyone should look for the tool, how weakness can be transformed to opportunities or to the strength. What to do with the threats? Think how we can reduce them or even transform to opportunities. And what to do with opportunities? Use them to become stronger. Examples of such a methods of working. They're looking easy on screen, not so easy when you are planning, and even more difficult when you're trying to implement this in real life. But I took examples from real 2004 planning document, which we were documenting that time. One of weaknesses, that yes, we are quite far to the north, and winter rowing available only outside country in training camps in the south. That's why in our country we were used to have some form of pre-selection criteria for the juniors, which usually were based on anthropometry, that if they meet requirements, they were brought to the south camps and training during winter time. Unfortunately, quite often it was happening that after coming back after a few months of training, high costs, at selection regattas, not so well-built boys or girls were faster on the water, even without long winter training in south camps, just due to their high motivation and strong will to win. And a lot of money were wasted, and very difficult was to transform this process. What we decided to do, officially change selection principles, and all selection and even pre-selection and right to go for training camps transformed to the rowers who were performing well on the water, were fast enough, and winning selection regattas. That's how weakness was transformed to the strengths, because finally we got high motivated junior team. Other example, weakness together with threat. On one hand, we recognized and coaches said that our athletes in 2004 very often, especially juniors, due to low experience of traveling to international regattas, even performing well at home, arriving to FISA event with hundreds of athletes, with high traffic in warming up and training areas, often were confused, losing their concentration, and were not able to perform like it was expected. And together we evaluated threats, because we recognized that our national government has plans to close our main rowing venue in Trakai and offer maybe later for the rowing some other facilities quite far away from the capital of the country. Actions we have planned were, first of all, improve level of local events, establish umpiring development program in order to increase quality of the regattas and keep regattas running in a way as close as possible to the conditions are used at FISA events. Because at that period, participation at regattas was quite low, we were very active to invite international crews to events in Trakai in order to increase number of participating crews and build conditions as close to FISA events as possible. And as very active, and maybe not one of you have recognized, that Lithuania decided to be extremely active for bidding and organizing different FISA events in Trakai in order to protect venue from plans of the government which were not in favor of wishes and wills of rowing community in the country. Strengths which we have now. National rowing events are really on acceptable level. Lithuania is organizing more international regattas than we were doing it more than 16 years ago. Athletes don't see big difference between local events and FISA events anymore. Good recognition of rowing in Lithuania due to number of FISA events happened. And instead of planning to close venue, now our state is investing in rowing venue in Trakai. So that's how, with this example, you can see that each threat or each weakness can be transformed to strength or opportunity. So, results of all this big work, which we were doing long, which we were doing hard, really analysis took more than 3 months of meetings and discussions. And we recognized the real situation in 2004, that we have private sponsorship possibilities in the country very, very limited, and rowing as a sport will remain highly dependent on state funding and public infrastructure in coming decades. And analysis of plans of the government and country budget development, it was becoming more and more clear that for the same funding, different sports, different federations will compete more and more. And state interested only in medals and only in medals at Olympic events. So it means in order to be good, you need to be good at Olympic events and really to perform with high results. Otherwise, funding is not possible. And what I mentioned, without funding, it's difficult to believe that we can count on good development on the sport. And results we had during building this plan. Very moderate results at Olympic Games 2004, 1 medal at World Juniors, no A finalist and World Under 23, and still not positive development stage in a rowing in the country. Actions. We all agreed that we will concentrate only on Olympic program and only sculling due to limited resources. So those who see how Lithuania is performing last years, you can really recognize that all attention always was to sculling, not to the sweep board. At the same time, we agreed that we are not putting high attention to lightweight rowing, and this is again due to low resources and genetics of Lithuanian as nationality, where people are quite big, higher than average in Europe, and of course to collect lightweights is not so easy like in other countries. Improvement of those layers of rowing which are supporting main target, Olympic program. And all efforts just to be recognized as a leading sports federation as a country. All actions were described. It was long and quite heavy document. And we have calculated that whatever we will do, how successful we will be or not, in the best case, we need minimum 10 years. 10 years, of course, is more than 8, it's more than 2 Olympic cycles. It means we should talk about minimum 12 years development program, because we will be measured by state, by community, by people of country, only by Olympic results. And we decided at the same time that if we cannot be best, at least we should be a little bit different comparing with other federations. And that's why Lithuanian Rowing Federation was first in the country who decided to present and announce official strategy document, and with announcing and naming official goal. Document was named Rowing Strategy 2004-2016, and in this strategy, implementing improvement actions and goal was published and was announced officially even in media. And we announced in 2004 that at Olympic Games 2016, Lithuania will qualify minimum 3 boats, and 2 of them will be able to fight for the medals. More than challenging, a lot of jokes and skeptical remarks from media, from other federations, even from inside rowing community. But it was not only dream, it was really package of actions, package of activities done in a way how successful business units are doing, and they were presented to annual Congress. And it was not only accepted by Congress and voted for, but each and every elected executive committee member was committed to follow strategy which was accepted and announced. How we went through this plan? We started at 2004, just mentioning Olympic Games, with 1 boat in games, 14th place. At 2008 in Beijing, we still were with 1 boat, winner of B final. Already received number of remarks from opponents that we are too far from our goal. But our answer was that you see only Olympic, but we already have achievements with juniors, we already developed under 23, and we're going forward. And we came to London, and already with 3 boats, and 1 of them was in final A. What means we're on the right track. And as document was mentioned, 2004-2016, we came to Rio de Janeiro and we presented in Olympic Games 5 boats, 2 medals. So what I can say, it was a challenging goal, but it was achieved. In a country, Lithuania was recognized as one of strongest sports in the country, and rowing was sport number 1 in number of medals at Olympic Games in 2016. Our ability to present documented plan with reports about milestones during this long, more than 12 years journey was good support for us when we were attracting sponsors, applying for funding, even asking sometimes more than it should be according to results achieved. But our efforts were well perceived by all community in the country. What happened with the strategy documents for federations? Today, in order to receive state funding, each and every sports federation in Lithuania must present to Ministry of Education and Sports long-term strategy document. Otherwise, they're not allowed to apply for state funding. My advice is for those who are willing to go for such a journey. Start with a team with different competences. It's not good if people will try to do inside community. External resource is available. Each and every country has number of rowers who were rowers in the past and now have good management, business, governance skills outside rowing. And external view is always supporting when you want to find your weaknesses and you want to find ways how to go further. Be patient and invest time into analysis of present situation and development stage of the country. At each development stage, different actions are needed. Whatever you will create, whatever document it will go live only when you will succeed to get acceptance and commitment from highest government body in your federation or club. Document must be live. It must be revised, adjusted, and improved every year. On the same time, each adjustment must be officially documented. All reasons of adjustment must be explained, and you must get approval from, again, highest governance body of federation. By doing adjustments, never give up with core principles of strategy. Even you are not successful at first steps, be persistent and go your way. It's only way to reach your goal. Like coaches are explaining to the rowers, same is for all teams who are developing rowing in the country. Communicate strategy with club coaches and athletes. It's a long journey. When you build strategy for more than 10 years, you must remember that at the middle of the journey, a lot of people will be already outside, not only your program, but outside rowing. And last but not least, do not put dates in the title of document. We, after evaluation, treated that this was one of our mistakes. We put program and named it Program 2004-2016. And we are going very well. What was happening every 4 years? At 2008, we prepared a document which was named Action Plan 2008-2016. What we did after 4 years? After 4 years, we introduced Development Plan 2012-2016 plus 4 years. It means up till 2020. Putting date allowed every one of us who was participating at the beginning start to believe that 2016 is kind of end of big journey, and maybe others will need to continue, and we can just start the rest of our life, enjoy other activities. And if you want to ensure a legacy of your program, legacy of your strategy, just put long-term strategy and adopt it every year or every 4 years, and you will be successful. Thank you, and best wishes from Lithuania. Good luck.
Hello, everyone. I hope you and your families are doing well. Today, we are talking about the Junior 18 and the difficult transition to reach the U23 and the elites. The topic is how to retain under 19s in rowing. We have become Zoomers, so I will try to record my presentation, master the technology, find the camera, and read my notes in English, my English. I would like to thank the members of the FISA Youth Commission for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to discuss this subject with all of you. During the World Rowing Youth Coaches Conference, which took place in Hangzhou in November 2019, I remarked during a working session that is the fundamental subject related to the physiology of the effort or biomechanics were regularly addressed in our conferences. The one related to human resources, management, coaching was less so. For educators and coaches, it is essential to manage and support the rower as best as possible in his personal development from adolescent to adulthood. I'm not going to give you a perfect and magic recipe based on scientific data, but rather share with you some thoughts and experience and thus open a debate for the future. So I'm going to tell you a story, our story. My presentation is of course based on my experience as a coach of the French junior and Olympic rowing teams, on the management of a young talent detection program, on my work within the French Swimming Federation, and the one alongside Belgium rowing. The position I have held during my career have enabled me to develop transversal skills and knowledge which can thus be transposed from one federation to another. I am passionate about managing and leading teams, and I've taken several training courses in these areas. So my presentation is therefore not an idealistic view. Returning under 19 in rowing, it is not the expression of the negative vision, but nevertheless, we all know and see that many rowers, too many rowers, stop their course or put in parentheses. They no longer row for their club and turn away from national teams. A licensee lost for a club is a licensee lost for the national federation and for the international federation. Knowing that the institutional weight of a sports organization is evaluated as much by the number of licensees or practitioners as by its international results. Now, I would like to share some documents. Okay, I think it's okay. I will show you some board with simple statistics which cover a period of 33 years from 1986 from 2019, from my experience as a coach and manager of the French and Belgium junior, U23 and elite teams, from my observation of international results. The indicators relate to, one, the number of juniors who stop, the number of those who continue in U23, the number of U23 who quit, who have a short or a long career, who reach the Olympic level, who get medals. We find all these indicators in the different boards. 3 indicators interest us: the percentage of junior who quit, the percentage of U23 who quit, and the number of U23 who pass the course towards the elite teams, who reach the top level. So, the board 1, the first study concerns the World Rowing Junior Championships in 1986. First indicators, 50% of junior kids, and after 63 of a U23 kid. We can observe that it was very good generation. Board 2, it's not exactly the same numbers, but the same trend. Board 3, these indicators is better. It seems when the results are better, we win 3 medals, more juniors seems to continue. Board 4, 23 years later, in manager position, it's a larger French team. This indicator, this one, this one. This one is better. More U23 continue. It's also the result of a young talent detection program. So the following of junior on U23 is more efficient. Board 5, manager position. The indicators are better, this one and this one. So it's also the results here, but it's also that the socio-professional monitoring of rowers is more efficient at this time. Board 6, Belgium study. The numbers are less important of rowers. We see that many juniors stop, but the good news is with only 3 rowers who are able to win 8 medals at the international events. Maybe the method is well. Board 7. This study concerns the women and the men's skiff registered during the World Rowing Junior Championship in 2018. Okay, we'll see these indicators: percentage of women stop, percentage of men stop. And here, the number of women or men continue to the elite who participate to all international events. Board 8 and 9, this study concerns the 3 medalist team in 8 women and men. The situation with the men is very difficult, less for Germany, and the situation with the women is better, especially Romania. Observation, I will have more time to deepen this study, but from 1986 to 2019, 34 years later, the finding is identical. More than 50% of junior kids. Of 50% who continue, it's about 60% who don't continue to the top level, who stop just after the U23. But it's more difficult to identify what exactly they become. When the results are better and the socio-professional monitoring of the rower is more efficient, more juniors seems continue, but it's already difficult in a U23. The indicators are better when the best junior row on study is a national center. In other Olympic sports, the number of the juniors who quit is sometimes higher, 60% or 70%. In the current context, the objective is to retain all the rowers, including the under-19s, within the clubs, and thus created a collective dynamic that becomes a strategic issue for the leaders, because once the crisis has subsided and hopefully ended, we will have to bounce back to look the future with serenity. An entire ecosystem is therefore under threat from club practice, which represents the pulse of our activity to the national teams, because they are the showcase of our great and noble Olympic sport, which through the quality of performances generate interest and inshore and international. During my career as a coach or manager, each time the junior teams won a medal, 11, observing them on the podium with often emotion and attention, a question obsessed me: how many of them are going to continue rowing, and what we have to do to keep those who wish to stop? No having a crystal ball or magic wonder, I thought that he must have some solution to curb this phenomenon and sometimes this bleeding. The first question that seems to me essential is how to return our clubs practitioners to the elite by paying particular attention to this category, which allows us to increase our talent pool. The second question, is there any logic in holding back young people when they don't want to? If they already want to leave, it is because the game is partly lost and that certain things upstream have been forgotten. I will also add that the generations follow each other but are not alike. The current generation have nothing to do with yesterday's. Hence, the logic of calling them by the baby boomer generation, X, Y, Z. A target survey carried out with each federation will provide us with more precise information on the subject to find out how is it going up, who is putting their career on hold and why. The federation are of course getting organized by sharing exchanges and experience on the subject with, in particular, all the coach with international qualification would allow further progress because human resources in our community are important. Collective intelligence must take precedence over individual intelligence. Nevertheless, we must try to identify the different reasons that motivate the dropouts and look together for solutions to build and secure the path for our future elites. A special context. Unfortunately, since the outbreak of the health crisis, this question has become even more topical. Our daily life has been disrupted. Our way of working, of moving around, of forging social link. This unprecedented crisis is affecting our social cohesion and our economy. Sport in general, clubs and federations are all affected to different degrees by this pandemic. In France, for example, a drop in the number of licensees has reached 25%, almost 4 million practitioners of almost 1 billion euro. The French Rowing Federation registers a loss of 700%. The French Swimming Federation registers a loss of 25%. Everybody knows the context which, according to government guidelines, required permits to train, or many regional, national, and international competitions are cancelled. It then becomes difficult to remain motivated in the absence of vision and specific objectives. Especially among the youngest, this often results in the loss of reference point, value, and identity. Now, the daily life of the under 19th junior. Why countries are more or less organized to develop rowing for all, access to the top level, upwards, and the organization of the top level, top sport, required specific adjustment. Clubs, regions, federations, sport ministries, sometimes private companies try to provide the best support for sportsmen and women in the context of socio-professional monitoring. Rowing has a strong school and university tradition. The combination of training and schooling generally brings to sportsmen, sportwomen balance, rigor, and high standards. It is formative, but often at the price of an investment that required a lot of sacrifice. The federations try to preserve this balance by accompanying the juniors in the double projects, sport and studies, so that they can reconcile training and studies. We send generally to adapt and lighten the school or university curriculum to make it more compatible with regular high-level practice. Support for under 19 is not only the result of the classic and professional follow-up, but also a more systemic approach. Indeed, the close environment, parents, teachers, coaches, and friends naturally exerts pressure which adds to societal difficulties, especially during this period, and which can be the cause of abandonment. It's always a question of balance, but as soon as this is broken, the rower is weakened. An example, the first confinement and cancellation of the Junior World Rowing Championship did not offer perspectives to all generations. Many could stop and question arises as to interest of continuing. In Europe, only the European Championships allowed the nations present to mitigate this process. It's the same with the U23. The anxiety-provoking and aggressive health crisis will subside. It's a matter of time, but the rowing community is obliged to find solutions to adapt in order to offer new perspectives to our younger generations. Now, why juniors stop rowing? What are the main factors? Why are they resistant? This phenomenon often escapes the coaches who are not always concerted. The announcement is sometimes brutal, and the stop is rarely anticipated. The recurring factors, the studies. This is the most common reason given related to the difficulty of reconciling training on higher education courses, university interest. Depending on the university curriculum. Medicine, for example, is very difficult to row and to study medicine. So this may be reality, but it's also often an excuse. The international literature devotes some article on the subject and suggests evokes of a more likely explanation. The relationships management and the relational dynamics. The coaches relationships often change in the wrong way. The coach's attitude is negative. The relationship that was based on trust is broken. The atmosphere within the club or the team no longer correspond to what he sought after by a young adult. Another factors, the management of training or planning, physical and psychological saturation, use sometimes very intense training loads over many years, cause physical and mental saturation. The brain says stop. The loss of pleasure, quite simply. Another factors, the insufficient level of progress on performance. Good results in junior are ultimately a goal and not an encouraging goal for continue and prepare an international career. When the results are not good, athletes feel that they are not good, which is never pleasant nor rewarding. Another factors, social reasons. The value of the activity may be perceived negatively by peers, friends, family. The commitment and the attitude of parents is not encouraging. The lack of attractiveness of the discipline compared to the others, lack of recognition, too confidential, little publicized, etc. Fortunately, with social networks, the rowers promote themselves. Sometimes he reinvents himself by championing. What are the approaches that can provide solutions? How to remedy it? How to act? What are the solutions what we must collectively provide. About the studies. As rowing is not a professional sport, rowers are obliged to study and learn a trade. In some countries, being sporty offers you a university entrance ticket and facilities compatible with high-level training. In other countries, the first criterion is academic and not specifically related to your sporting result. The facilities are minimal or no exist. If many university courses are designed to enable top-level sportmen or sportwomen to study and train, I still believe that the offer is not large enough, not sufficiently diversified, and that it does not always correspond to the aspiration of us rowers who regret it once their career is over. We are well aware that one of the factors for success in rowing is autonomy and organization. Poorly organization in junior, in U23, discourage and often stop. In the near future, if a socio-professional follow-up is not optimized, it will be increasingly difficult for the under 19 to reconcile studies on the high-level career. Proposals. The young people are hyper-connected in order to bring them a more international vision that will combine sport, culture, travel, and thus build their future in a more creative spirit. I would like to see the organization of an international summer university supported by visa or federation on campuses around the world, which will combine sporting and academic excellence, all supervised by rowing experts, like Erasmus program, exchanges during workshops, would allow this category to shed light on their vision of tomorrow's rowing in order to know their needs. When were they asked? About human factors. The population were interested in here has emerged from adolescence and it's entering adulthood. We are still witnessing a psychic and a psychological transformation, search for identity, acquisition of autonomy. It is often this passage from the rebellious and submissive adolescent stage to that of responsible adult, hence the importance of being accompanied. Young people also change emotionally, which leads them to a change in relation life. They are looking for boundaries, trying to identify with a group of friends of more or less the same age. In short, these are parameters that the coach must take into account if he wants to train and retain his staff and make them perform well. Acting on the coach as on the athlete, the coach-riser relationship makes the difference. In concrete terms, the coach has a capital role and must all these parameters in order to lead the rowers to become progressively autonomous and able to express their needs. It is a complex management process for the coach, who is sometimes deprived. It is also necessary in some cases to accompany him and to optimize his training. How many times have we found ourselves helpless in front of young adults? How many times have we lost the mindset to achieve a high-level result? You don't need, to be a coach to understand this. A father or a mother knows this. And I remember when you talk to the junior or U23s, right in the eyes, you have to do with mutants, more skillful with their fingers to send a message on their mobile than holding a oar. It's a joke. Being supported can mean support from one's close professional environment, team leaders or colleagues, which represent a collective force essential to success, but also being coached by an external expert. Example, our mode of intervention is often directive. Communication is vertical. On this work, this training allows us to adapt our management style. Sometimes it's necessary following training courses allows the coach to carry out an introspective work on what he is, on what he does or has done. Combined with our experience as a coach, we can then better understand the relationships with the rowers. To better understand the system and the professional environment in which we evolve. And if you are a team leader, you can better manage the other coach using their talent and their creative spirit rather than focusing on performance. Let me explain. The primary ambition of a coach is to allow the best rowers to blossom and progress in the collective project with a view to national and international deadlines. When a coach's ambition is personal, he creates all the conditions for it not to work. The athlete feels it. The coach is often a man or a woman alone, who are on the front line, who are at the front of whatever our daily commitment, who are often judged on the result. But it is only the result that counts, sometimes immediate result. That is the question. Because even with good result, good coach are forced to leave their post. One can also feel in danger professionally because our position exposes us technically by politically. One can then lose confidence and then no longer be sufficiently relevant with one's student rowers. If the risk factor is creative and the search for a challenge drives us forward, this training allows us to better understand our forces and better express our potential to our teams. Being better trained in pedagogy and psychology means adapting to their age group and thus teaching them better, gaining their confidence, convincing them, and gaining loyalty. If a rower has confidence in the training method, it is above all because he trusts the person who teaches it. A story. Apart from the technique and the training program, we all had to look for solutions to better communicate with the athlete, to find the words, to motivate them during training and before a World and Olympic final. How many rounds of the village have we done alone, thinking, repeating the briefing of the next day in order to animate our teams with a force that will make them invincible and win a gold medal? I can give you 3 Olympics with the same ones. You have to adapt yourself and find best solution. But sometimes we do what we can. So coaching is also a solution. The exercise is even more complicated with the juniors and the U23s because they trust the coach completely. You can't disappoint them. While preparing this presentation, I was thinking of all these coaches that I have met during my international career, but rarely met in the end. Maybe the language barrier, who could testify and pass on their coaching experience and leave a great legacy. Moreover, many coaches are invited to speak rowing in seminars organized by the other sports. Is this a paradox? From my personal experience, I also know that no one is a prophet in his country. Proposals. I will see a FISA executive school where experts could regularly speak during face-to-face or video session, since now we have become Zoomers. The category of under 19 years olds is one in between, as they can feel completely isolated. We are used to working in silo. Everything is to compartmentalize junior, U23, seniors. Why not create links between the categories? Links between top sport athletes and U23, athletes in terms of experience, mentoring, so that the gap between them and the U23 appears to be narrower. Promote talents, hopes, rowers in the same way in terms of transfer in order to support the junior. Integrate mental preparation or coaching from junior level. Training is based on physical, technical, tactical sometimes, and no mental preparation. It says is a stool has only 3 feet and the athlete has no head, no heart, only a body, much like a breathing competition. Work on collective dynamic and team cohesion. The culture of the sport world, unfortunately, induces the value of individual competition. The more you go up, and the more places are rare. And this can lead to rivalry between sportsmen and women, which can be stimulating at times and harmful at other times, especially in rowing, which is an individual sport with a collective character in part. However, the coach has his skills, or it is useful for them to be accompanied by an external professional. On this subject, I've just seen that in France, the French Rugby Federation, or the National Institute of Sport, accredits mental trainers or professional coaches to support sportsmen and women or teams. I am well aware that many countries are already engaged in these processes, but it will be necessary to verify if it's the case with a junior or U23. Training on the planning management. Training programming is generally built on the knowledge we have of the following energy aspects on the various physiological processes that take place during a rowing race. This is what allows us to calibrate the training to taking into account the learning of the junior 16, 18, the double process linked to the physiological and physical maturity. I am teaching you anything. In all sport, the training process is gradual. It is long and it has to follow steps. When the main principles are not respected and the practice is too intensive, it causes physical and mental saturation. The brain simply says stop, which also causes psychological problem on the sportsman or woman then prefers to stop. There is no more fun coming to training. When planning is overloaded between training session and competition, the effect is the same. Now to finish, I will therefore conclude that it is also important to focus on the soft personal development, sport psychology, sociology of sport, and not only on the hard physiology of effort, biomechanics, especially with this injury category, which is still somewhat transformable. Our culture is based on the result, on the search for performance, on what is visible, but we must take interest in the so-called soft science. There is a now and after. Open up reflection and action around a lab or initiative group made of coaches, junior, under 19, U23, and top athletes, and external professionals, sociologists and sport psychological, to refine the analysis. Rework the support provided to rovers by optimizing the social and professional follow-up by securing their career over several years and by encouraging more dynamic relationships. We found the coaching support of coaches by strengthening cooperation and exchanges at the international level, created a school with an international framework. The notion of retraining is important in order to prepare for the end of the career of rowers and coaches. The reconversion must be prepared. Rowing is really a great sport, a fantastic sport, which must remain at the forefront of innovation in these areas, I'm convinced. But be careful, the other sports are not expecting us. Our credibility is at stake. Let's try to remain a philosopher. Wherever your talents and the needs of the world meet, there is your vocation, Aristotle. It's not because things are difficult that we don't dare, it's because we don't dare that they are difficult. Seneca. Thank you for your attention. Rowing is life.
On behalf of the Youth Commission and Competitive Commission, I would like to thank all three speakers, Lars-Arne, Edmundas, and Dominique, for their excellent contribution to the World Rowing 2020 Virtual Coaches Conference. I would like to remind you, all speakers will also take place of tomorrow's live and questions answer session. And please send your questions to Peter Cookson or Rosie McLaughlin, or put them in the Zoom chat during the live session, and we will try to get as many answered as possible. Thank you all for joining the conference.